Next up is Brit.
Hello. Thank you, Madam Chairman. As the Senate overwhelmingly voted yes.
You can call me Mr. Chairman if you want.
Well, I cannot be compelled to use your preferred pronouns as you have all
Wait
voted.
a minute. We're talking about preferred pronouns. A lot of people are. I prefer to be called Chairman French. That's my preferred pronoun.
I know, and you all voted that preferred pronouns cannot be compelled speech in SF 77. Anyway.
That, my friends, is what malicious compliance looks like. That exchange took place on February 20th during a committee hearing in Wyoming State Senate, and the reason why that constituent, Brit Boral, purposely misgendered Republican Senator Tim French was because he voted the day before that hearing took place to adopt a measure that would effectively let anybody use whatever pronouns they wanted, even if somebody had preferred pronouns. Senate File 0077, called the Compelled Speech is Not Free Speech file, prohibits the state and its political subdivisions from requiring the use of preferred pronouns and says the state and its political subdivisions shall not compel or require an employee to refer to another employee using that employee's preferred pronouns. In other words, it lets you use whatever pronouns you want. And idiots who voted for it didn't understand that that doesn't just apply to trans people. It also applies to cis people as well, since cis people, like trans people, also have preferred pronouns. So Brit was simply complying with the text of SF0077 as it was written, but as you saw, this chairman couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that something that he voted for led to him being misgendered as well, right? Now, as a cis person and a Republican, I don't think that he expected to have his gender identity invalidated, because he probably voted for this thinking that it would just fuck over trans people, but he didn't realize that he voted to invalidate everyone's gender identities, which just goes to show you how clueless these people are, which is a symptom of transphobia, by the way. But after that exchange blew up online, Brit posted a video to her Instagram emphasizing that she didn't want her malicious compliance to be interpreted in a way to suggest that misgendering people, including transphobes, is something that trans allies should do as a strategy, because that's just not a good way to further the cause for trans rights. Nonetheless, she did explain why she chose to do it in that instance.
I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say that misgendering people is not cool. I think most people in the comments have gotten the assignment, but it's always disrespectful and dehumanizing, whether intentional or not. And when I chose to misgender the chairman, I did so very deliberately, because I've been watching these legislators in my state tear people down and not listen to public testimony. So in this instance, disrespect was the message, but I didn't take it lightly, and I worry about people emulating my actions in bad faith. We're all about mindful, malicious compliance here, and I hope y'all will be too.
Now, she also encouraged people to get involved in state and local politics, since the most draconian bills are being passed at that level. And on that note, there's actually more from that exchange that I want to play for you, because Brit also brought up another anti-trans bill called the What is a Woman Act, which would result in potential genital inspections for women and girls. Yeah, so she confronted them for their perverted obsession with trans people and then proceeded to shame them for not doing anything meaningful to actually help people who need to be helped, to represent the people that they were elected to represent. Just watch, this is great.
Anyway, my name is Brit Boral, and I'm a constituent calling in from Casper to voice my opposition to HB 32.
Time's almost up. Go ahead.
As Ms. Burlingame noted here today, this bill not only flies in the face of biological fact, because intersex and two-spirit people have always existed, but it puts women in real danger through government overreach. The only logical enforcement mechanism for bills like this involves gross invasions of privacy. If women do not present as female enough, could they be required to undergo a genital inspection just to use the bathroom or the gym locker room? Would they be required to submit some kind of medical proof of genitals to the government? The bills introduced this session attacking transgender people and children are couched in insincere language about protecting women. However, what they are really doing is targeting a demographic that makes up 1% of the population. I'm tracking more than a dozen bills that this body has heard stripping rights and healthcare access away from women and trans people, rather than focusing on issues that actually matter to Wyoming citizens. This legislative session has been filled with bills more concerned with engaging in culture wars than tackling the difficult work you were all sent here to do. to govern effectively for all of the people of Wyoming. So I ask you to please stop this hateful rampage to put women and trans people in deliberate physical danger. Please vote no on this bill, and please, for the love of our great state, do your jobs.
Thank you for your testimony. We are doing our job. We work hard at it every, starts with a D, every D day.
He genuinely thinks that he's clever, but you're not, bro. You're not cute. You look like an idiot to everybody else who's not inside of your transphobic bubble. But to Brit's point, the red states leading the charge against LGBTQ plus rights, hyper-fixating on cultural issues, are doing so to the detriment of their own constituents' well-being. Let me show you what I mean. So when you look at Oxfam's state rankings on labor, for example, red states rank the lowest on wages, worker rights, and the right to collective bargaining. When you look at this graphic provided by US News, overall rankings are pretty spread out. To be fair, you do have some red states ranked the highest, but most of the lowest ranked states are red states. And when you control for category, you can see specifically where they're failing. On healthcare, the most underperforming states are red states. All of the highest ranked states are blue states. For education, it's not as stark, but blue states are overperforming red states overall, with some exceptions. When you look at the infant mortality rates in this country overall, they are higher in red states than they are in blue states. When you look at life expectancy, just take a look at the top 10 states with the highest life expectancies compared to the bottom 10 with the lowest life expectancies. Notice anything that stands out? See, this is not coincidental. It is the direct result of policies being enacted in these states. And Reddit user Trampoline Bears put together this map highlighting just general differences between red and blue states. And in his data, it also shows that higher levels of human development is correlated with blue states. Blue states are also correlated with lower COVID death rates after the vaccine became available, because we all know Republicans are anti-vax now. And it's also correlated with more civil rights for citizens, meaning more freedom. And to be clear, this doesn't mean that everything is peachy in blue states, because that's absolutely not the case. But considering the crises that these red states face in particular, ask yourself, does it seem reasonable to be focusing on things like this? As LGBTQ Nation reports, Republicans in 9 states are pushing measures to end same-sex marriage rights. Those are mostly in red states, by the way. Idaho, Michigan, Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota have all introduced resolutions calling on the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell v. Hodges, and these resolutions have already passed in Idaho and North Dakota. In Missouri, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Texas, Republicans there have introduced bills to privilege opposite-sex marriages in defiance of Obergefell in order to trigger a challenge to the Supreme Court. But there's more. Missouri's Republican Attorney General is suing to overturn local bans on conversion therapy. Is this going to bring down the cost of eggs? I don't think so. What about this? Republican lawmakers in Iowa would make it a felony punishable with up to 5 years in prison if you choose to take your child to a drag show. This would rule out Mulan too, I guess, right? I wonder if this is going to bring down the cost of living for people living there. See, these are just some of the things that Republicans in these states are focused on in lieu of actual policies to benefit working class people. But I don't want to give you the impression that this is only a problem at the state level, because as you all know, Republicans at the national level are just as guilty. For example, the Department of Education has effectively stopped looking into civil rights complaints filed by students when it comes to discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or race, as well as potential violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. On top of that, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is now just dismissing cases filed against employers who were accused of discriminating against their employees on the basis of them being trans or non-binary. And Trump has also banned the word trans from federal websites and documents, and they even removed references to trans people from the Stonewall Monument website, even though trans women led the Stonewall riots. Not to mention, he signed an executive order to not recognize trans identities on passports, and as a result, some trans people just haven't been able to get passports altogether, and the ones that have them are dealing with this type of dehumanizing bullshit, as described by actress Hunter Schafer.
My gender markers were first changed in my teens when I first got my driver's license, and then passports following. All have been female since then. Hasn't really been a problem. However, last year when I was filming in Barcelona, our car got broken into and my bag got stolen, and inside of that was my passport, which was supposed to last me up until my 30s. And So I got an emergency passport, which was very simple at the time. It's basically just a copy of my old passport, but temporary and only supposed to be used within the year. So as soon as I got back to the States, I had to get this fixed and get it replaced with a real proper passport, which I went to the Federal Passport Agency today in LA and did. I've had to do this one time before. No part of the process was different. I filled everything out just like I normally would. I put female, and when it was picked up today and I opened it up, they had changed the marker to male. I don't give a fuck that they put an M on my passport. It doesn't change really anything about me or my transness. However, it does make life a little harder. Personally, I haven't tested it out yet. I'll find out next week when I have to travel abroad for the first time with my new passport. But I'm pretty sure it's gonna come along with having to out myself to like Border Patrol agents and that whole gig much more often than I would like to or is really necessary. And this is just my personal circumstance. And thinking about other trans women who this might also be happening to, or other trans people, the list only gets longer as far as the intricacies that come along with the difficulty that this brings into like real life shit.
And this is happening because why? What does this do? How does this help people who need help? How does this get healthcare to the people who don't have healthcare? How does this help people who are food insecure, living in food deserts, get the nutrition that they need? It does nothing to help regular people. And it's damaging to people in the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, for those who don't know, coming out is something that we all know that we have to deal with for the rest of our lives. Whenever you start a new job or you move to a new place and meet new people, there's always a decision to be made when to come out. And after that initial coming out phase to your family and friends, it's always more informal. Typically, you just drop a casual reference to your same-sex partner and whatnot. But most queer people are very deliberate when they choose to do this. They have to assess whether or not they're opening themselves up to harassment or potentially even violence. And Trump just took that away from trans people with this. Why? Because he's chosen to make them the scapegoats for all of our country's problems. And I guess the implication is if we can eliminate the threat that trans people pose, everything else is going to be just fine. Just listen to something that he said at CPAC. It is insane, even for Donald Trump standards.
It's so much wealth. Wouldn't it be nice today? Of course, now we give it away to transgender this, transgender that. Everybody gets a transgender operation. It's just wonderful. No, we give it away like to crazy things.
That is profoundly fucking idiotic. He's basically saying that a good portion of our country's economic woes can be attributed to all of the free transgender operations that are taking place that we're all paying for because apparently when nobody was looking, politicians made healthcare free in America, I guess. Sounds legit, bro. But I mean, the question is, why is there so much focus on things that affect a small portion of the population, as Brit pointed out at the beginning of this video? And the answer is because they are putting on a show. This is political theater. It is performative productivity. They're passing all of these anti-LGBTQ plus policies to make it look like they're busy, so that way they can try to convince you that they're delivering for you, when in actuality, it's nothing more than a distraction from the real agenda, which is to pass tax cuts for the rich. I mean, House Republicans just passed a budget that includes trillions of dollars in tax cuts for rich people. And do you want to know what you get out of this bill? Nothing. In fact, you get less than nothing. You actually lose money because taxes would go up for most Americans under this budget. And to finance these tax cuts for the rich, they are choosing to cut Medicaid, food stamps, and other social safety net services that help you get by. So they are literally taking money from the poor to give to the rich. It's a reverse Robin Hood. And no, their budget does not include no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, or no tax on Social Security like Donald Trump promised. But ask yourself, if Republicans were honest about all of this, and they actually said that, yeah, our only purpose basically is to steal money from you, how do you think people would respond? They'd be pretty pissed off, right? I think most people would not want that to happen. That's why they lie. They'll tell you that the wealth will one day trickle down in order to justify tax cuts for rich people, or they'll say that we're all in debt because of the trans operations that we're all paying for. Or they'll say that the real leeches are the single mothers on welfare, not the billionaires like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, who get billions of dollars in government subsidies financed by the taxpayers, by the way. So if they can convince you that your immigrant neighbor or your trans neighbor, they're really the cause of all of your problems, they're hoping that you'll direct your anger towards them and not the people at the top who bought off these politicians to rig the economy against all of us. But the culture war is not a victimless war. Lives are destroyed in service of this attempt to distract us all by cynically pitting us against each other. It's evil. And that's what's happening. But I do think that more Americans are beginning to wake up to the game that's being played, and they're starting to understand that our collective struggle is linked. And nobody is free until all of us are free. And I say this because Republicans in town halls across the country have been getting their asses chewed out by constituents who don't like that an unelected billionaire is basically making cuts that affect them. On top of that, people across the country are beginning to stand up. There's protests taking place in every single city. There's the 50-51 protests. And it's really nice to see. Also, we saw Brit Boral at the beginning of this video confront anti-trans lawmakers. But on top of that, when Iowa Republicans introduced legislation to abolish civil rights protections for trans and non-binary people, guess what happened? 500 people showed up to the state capitol, and this happened. You love to see it. So what needs to happen is exactly what is starting to happen. Working class people of all backgrounds have to come together to take on the billionaires who've rigged the economy against all of us. But in order to have true class solidarity, you have to show up for each other. If you show up for trans people, they'll show up for you. This is how we all win. Because trans people, they're also being exploited by their employers just like you, but their ability to focus on labor specifically is going to be hindered if they're primarily having to focus on their own safety and the government trying to literally erase them from existence, which is why you have to help them so they can help you. When you fight for marginalized groups, you're not just fighting for them specifically, you are investing in your own liberation as well. So we need to unequivocally reject bigotry and resist it as vociferously as we possibly can. And I applaud the people in this video, like Brit Boral and the protesters at the Iowa State Capitol, as well as anybody else doing the same thing across the country that we didn't talk about, for leading the way.
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Play stupid games.
F around and find out.
Prizes. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Play stupid game. Pride. Trans rights are human rights. It is necessary to push trans on the kids. Pride.